Hey guys, I'm Solsetlava, and if you didn't hear, last night Nintendo had a special presentation that they streamed online where they talked a lot about the launch of their upcoming console, the Nintendo Switch. So I thought to give some of my thoughts on it. Right out the gate, they announced the launch date of March 3rd with a retail price of $300, which I think is a pretty decent price for a high-end mobile console device. I sort of felt like $250 seemed a bit ways on the cheaper side of things, so I think $300 is a nice settling point for it, not too cheap and not too expensive. Another huge reveal was that the console isn't going to be region locked, which is super awesome to hear and means that all the cool Japan-only games are now open for the world to purchase. They also revealed that they seem to be overhauling their online services, and I think they mentioned it's going to be available in the fall, which I think is great because it's been pretty flaky on the Wii U, at least for playing online Smash and Splatoon. But all that said and done, they announced it would be a paid service, similar I guess to what Xbox and PlayStation offer. So, part of me is looking forward to a hopefully better online experience, but I'm also wondering how competitive their price point will be, compared to the other console companies. They also went into a bit more details on the console itself. Most of the details were things we'd already heard about in other presentations, talking about things like the docking and undocking of the console, the removal of the Joy-Con grip controllers, and things like that. I'm not sure if they'd previously revealed it in the news or anything, but the presentation was the first time I'd heard about the console screen itself having a capacitive touchscreen, which was interesting to hear, though they didn't showcase anything that seems to take advantage of that particular feature, so I wonder how much it might ultimately be used in the long run. They then spent a lot of time in the presentation talking about the capabilities of the Joy-Con controllers. I think they confirmed a few things that had been seen in the patents for the console. One thing they mentioned was an IR sensor that seems to be pretty sensitive about objects that it detects in its beam. Basically on, I guess, the tip of one of the Joy-Con controllers is a little IR sensor that shoots a beam that can kind of detect, objects that are in front of it, that are getting closer or far away, and it can detect certain types of movement, which is kind of interesting. They also mentioned amiibo support straight out of the box. So on the front of the face of one of the Joy-Con controllers, there's basically a little sensor that allows you to read the amiibos just like on the Wii U gamepad, which is pretty cool. And another big thing that they mentioned was a new HD rumble feature, which seems to be a much more sensitive feedback system in the controllers. The explanation that they gave for it was a little odd to kind of conceptualize. They talked about being able to hold up the controller, kind of like a glass that's full of ice cubes, and that if you shake it around, you can kind of tell how many ice cubes are inside of it, which is, I guess, interesting to think about, but overall, just thinking about all those features, a lot of them seemed kind of gimmicky to me, and I sort of feel like it's not so likely that third-party developers or even Nintendo themselves are going to take too much advantage of those features, similar to the features that showed up on the Wii U. So I kind of wonder if it might have just been a lot of extra technology for nothing. That all said, in order to showcase all these new capabilities of the Joy-Con controllers, they did announce two new games that really utilize those features. One game is called 1-2 Switch, and the other game was called ARMS. Now, the game 1-2 Switch looks like a party game that uses the Joy-Con controllers in a non-video game sort of way, almost actually more like a board game, because you don't actually look at like a video game screen to play the game, but instead you use the Switch mobile console, I guess, as a sort of background manager for, I guess, tracking the progress of the game itself, while you play the actual game, holding one of the Joy-Con controllers and then facing another person in front of you. And then, you both do things like you pretend to cut each other down with swords, or you do like a Western-style quick draw fight, stuff like that. Personally, while I can see the appeal for something like that, for maybe a party-going setting, it seemed kind of gimmicky to me, and a bit of a weak opener for the presentation since it was the first game that they really showcased for the console. I don't really think many companies would utilize those sorts of features, because they're so unique, and I get the impression that it'll turn out to be a game sort of like Nintendo Land was for the Wii U, if you've played that. That was a game that really showcased a lot of potential ideas for how to innovate gameplay with the unique console features of the Wii U, but ultimately it turned out to be a bit too out there for most third-party developers to pick up on, and because it requires a lot of research to figure out how to actually make games that utilize those features in an effective and fun way. The other game that they announced, which was called ARMS, looked a bit more interesting as a new IP for the company. If you've ever watched the anime One Piece, it's kind of like Gum Gum Punch, the fighting game. It's sort of like a boxing, but every punch you throw out shoots out like a long spring. It seemed creative, I guess, and looked like it might have a lot of depth to the gameplay, and it might be addictive in the same way that Splatoon was when it launched. And just in general, it made me smile seeing Nintendo releasing another quirky new title for the system. I guess my one concern, though, is that the game looked a little slow, maybe? And maybe a little repetitive, too. Though I'm hoping, since they gave it such a big preview in the presentation, that it'll turn out to be a very compelling game on the system. It would have been really cool, too, if they somehow tied it into the Punch-Out universe, somehow, like a futuristic boxing version, since, it's a bunch of people fighting each other with their fists, but maybe we'll see more about something like that down the road. Nintendo then went into a number of more traditional games announced for the console, which was really the meat of the presentation. Overall, personally, I felt as though Nintendo had the same kind of strong first-party lineup that they almost always do, that I really love about their consoles. But when it came to third-party titles, I was a little disappointed, and I sort of worry for the company, since I think it was like really one of the big things I was hoping they would knock out of the park during the presentation, but that they didn't really. The first big reveal was Super Mario Odyssey, which is a new 3D roaming adventure-style exploration game that's more in the vein of the Mario 64 and Mario Sunshine games that released on the N64 and GameCube. I'm actually pretty stoked about the game, since Mario 64 is my favorite Mario game and my second favorite video game of all time, and so I think seeing a new open adventure kind of game in the series is really exciting. The game looks kind of weird though. They seem to have completely left the Mushroom Kingdom and instead showcased some fairly strange locations. One location that looked like New York City, and another location that looked like ancient desert ruins, and some other odd and overall fascinating looking areas. For some reason, I was reminded of the game Mario is Missing, which is an educational game that was poorly received way back in the 90s that had Luigi globe-trotting the real world to try and find Mario. I think Odyssey, though, sounds like an interesting change of pace for the series regardless of the strange settings, and I look forward to it when it seems to be launching at the end of this year. I was kind of hoping for it to launch with the console, since that would have been awesome, but I guess they're still working on it. The big news for me, especially, was Splatoon 2. I am a huge fan of Splatoon on the Wii U, and finding out that a sequel is releasing on the Switch has got me super soaked. I mean, super stoked, but I guess that works out too. The game looks better than ever, and there are lots of new features that they've added that look really cool. It looks to be like a dual-wielding weapons mechanic in the game, maybe? It wasn't clear in the presentation if they could, these two dual-wielded weapons could be controlled separately with the Joy-Con controllers. If you could maybe point them in different directions while you're playing, or if it was maybe just some new regular weapon they were just showcasing that plays like all the others. But it was still exciting to think about the new possibility for gameplay mechanics. They also showed off some cool new maps, some strange items like an ink jetpack that reminded me of the Flood from Super Mario Sunshine, and what looked like a new special attack with an ink cloud that rains down on the map as it's moving across the sky, I guess. There was new hairstyles and clothing that also looked awesome, and just overall, it really looked like a true sequel to Splatoon, so I'm really excited about the game coming out, which I think they said was going to be this summer, and so I'm stoked. I'm super stoked. They also revealed a few trailers for upcoming third-party titles, a sequel to Xenoblade Chronicles, a new Shin Megami Tensei title that's in the works, a Fire Emblem Dynasty Warrior style game, and a new kind of 2.5D RPG from Square Enix that's tentatively called Project Octopath Traveler, which is kind of a weird name. Personally though, I wasn't all too interested in them, in any of those games. I've never had a chance to play the original Xenoblade. I was a fan of Persona 3, but never got into the mainline Shin Megami Tensei series. I'm not too big a fan of Dynasty Warriors or Fire Emblem. Well, I mean, I guess they're fun, but just never really got too deep into them. And I didn't care for the character designs in the new Octopath RPG trailer. They looked kind of generic and in the vein of modern light novel anime, which I guess I'm just not very much interested in. At that point in the presentation, I think is when things started to feel a little weak. They brought in a few speakers from different third-party studios, including Sega, Suda51, EA, and Bethesda, I think. And they all sort of briefly announced that they were working on upcoming titles, like a sequel to No More Heroes and a FIFA game, or certain ports for the system, with like a confirmation of the Skyrim port. I was disappointed though that there weren't any new major Western titles in development that were announced for the Switch. Overall, it seemed like the third-party lineup was kind of weak and just not all there. And since it was one of the major concerns that I had going into the presentation, I'm kind of worried about if the support is really going to be there for the console in the long run. It kind of almost felt like what happened with the Wii U, I guess, that it might also be happening with the Switch, where developers sort of say that they support the console, but really they're just going to wait things out for a bit, test the waters, and if the Switch doesn't catch on, they may just drop support for the console altogether. Which, to me, that seems like it might be a big problem for the console moving forward. The last thing they announced was the huge bombshell of the presentation that I think everyone loved, which was the Breath of the Wild trailer. Personally, I've actually been kind of on the fence about the game so far. Although I do like the world feel of it, because it reminds me of the original Zelda game on the NES, which I really like the design sensibilities for that game. In Breath of the Wild, though, the world and the gameplay that's been showcased just hasn't really caught my eye too much. For me, Ocarina of Time is my personal favorite Zelda game, mostly because the world portrayed in that game is a very particular strain of Western-style kind of fantasy that I really love. And unfortunately, Breath of the Wild seems to be more in the vein of the design sensibilities that showed up in Twilight Princess and Skyward Sword. That's a little bit less ways Western style kind of fantasy and a bit more of an original style of fantasy that I'm not as much a fan of. But that all said, the trailer actually surprised me in that it really seems to have much more depth for the storytelling and atmosphere than I was expecting from the game, and maybe it's more compelling than I originally gave it credit. Now, the one thing that bugged me in the trailer were some scenes showing a sort of overly emotional Princess Zelda crying and falling into Link's arms. It almost seemed like some bad anime tropes, or kind of fan fiction kind of material that sort of seeped its way into the Zelda universe. But at the moment, I'm willing to give the game the benefit of the doubt and hope that it doesn't become a bit too melodramatic in the final product. Generally, I was pretty much sold on the game, and I'm looking forward to finding out more about it in the coming weeks, since it's going to launch with the Switch on March 3rd, which I think is going to be a huge boon for the console launch, considering it doesn't look like there may be a huge amount of titles available right out of the gate, and also because, Zelda has traditionally been a system seller, and I think there's been a lot of, positive reaction to all the trailers so far for the game, and a lot of people are excited, so it's a very good thing, I think, for the console. There are actually some other games that weren't mentioned in the presentation that I thought to also bring up. If you went to the Nintendo site after the presentation ended, they actually have a trailer there for the new Mario Kart 8 Deluxe for the Switch, which is cool because it actually shows new content for the game. In particular, being able to play as Inklings from Splatoon, as well as a new Splatoon map. I think there's also been rumors, or maybe it was confirmed already, I don't remember, that they're bringing back the traditional battle mode maps for the Switch version, which would be awesome since I actually don't currently own Mario Kart 8, so that would really sell me on picking it up for the Switch. There were also a few other games mentioned on the site. There's Super Bomberman R, which looks to be a new entry in the series, a port of Minecraft, a new title called Snipper Clips, which looks like an arts and crafts indie-style puzzle game, and I think also like a Puyo Puyo Tetris game? Not too sure. But most seem like fairly small releases or ports, so maybe it's not as exciting to hear about, but it's still neat to see all the same. And that was the presentation overall. Personally, I'm really excited about all the upcoming first-party titles on the system, though I do feel that the third-party lineup is a little weak, and I'm concerned about the long-term implications that might have on the success of the console in the long run. I was also kind of surprised that there wasn't an announcement for Smash Brothers for a port or something like that, or even maybe a new entry in a long-running series like Metroid. But I'm guessing that'll come sometime down the road, and they just wanted to focus mainly on things that were really fresh for the Switch console. For me, as a huge Nintendo fan, I'm pretty sure that the console will be very, very enjoyable for me, and so I'm definitely looking forward to it when it launches in March, and I've actually already gotten it on pre-order. That's how excited I am. So what were your thoughts on Nintendo's presentation? Are you excited by the announcements or worried about their lineup? Feel free to leave your comments below. Other than that, I hope you enjoyed this reaction. If you liked it, feel free to hit that like button, and if you really liked it and haven't done so already, feel free to hit that subscribe button too. That's all for now. You guys take care. I hope you all have a good one, and I'll talk to you later. Ciao.